Countless times over American history, we have seen events that force people to be glued to their television. The OJ trial, the disappearance of Malaysian Flight 371, and most recently the Titan submersible are examples of events where the general public needs to see what happens next. On the night of October 14th, 1987, we saw what could be described as the first time this happened. The story of 18-month-old Jessica McClure from Midland, Texas terrified and captivated the eyes of millions when the nightly news aired each night. Jessica was playing in the backyard of her aunt's home daycare center, stumbled and fell through an 8-inch wide opening of an abandoned well. This is the story of Jessica McClure. The morning for baby Jessica started like any other. Arriving at her aunt's house in the mid-morning hours, at around 10 a.m. she was playing outside with several other children. After some time, her aunt realized she was no longer in sight and began to panic. Knowing there was a dry well in her backyard, she rushed out and saw that a large heavy stone covering the hole was moved. Seeing Jessica at the bottom of the well, about 20 feet down, she immediately called 911. The opening of the well was only 8 inches wide, and when rescue crews arrived, they realized no one came close to being lowered through the gap to retrieve her. Further looking at their tools, they realized they had nothing that could grab the toddler to bring her back up safely. Seeing that she was moving around, they felt the pressure to work quickly. As local news stations caught wind of the story, scores of journalists descended on the street out front of the house. Within the day, the scene was broadcasted on national television. After the first night, on the morning of October 15th, rescuers and the family were becoming desperate and were forced to check if Jessica was still alive. One of the technicians lowered a microphone down the shaft, and to their surprise, they heard her humming and singing the song Winnie the Pooh. In the coming hours, they also heard periodic crying, which hinted at Jessica being injured. The rescuers knew as long as she was making noise, she was still alive. Because of the fear of internal injuries, medical personnel decided not to send her food or water in fear that it would do more harm than good. And for obvious reasons, they brought in extra help to find a solution. As one day turned into two, rescuers realized the only way to get to her was to drill into the well horizontally. Over the next day, crews of rescue workers, mining experts, and local volunteers labored around the clock to drill a shaft parallel to the well. Then tunneling horizontally through dense rock to connect the two shafts, they finally reached Jessica. On the night of October 16th, after 58 hours in the well, a bandaged and dirt-covered baby Jessica was pulled out of the well by paramedics. A worker carried her in her arms as they were hoisted up the shaft to the surface. With scores of journalists catching the dramatic rescue on camera, it was broadcasted on live television in front of an audience of millions. Being sent directly to the hospital for injuries to her head, several cuts and bruises, it was quickly discovered that one of her toes on her left foot was going to need to be removed as it was infected with gangrene. Recovering in the hospital for more than a month, her family was flooded with gifts and cards from well-wishers. Also receiving a visit from the vice president, it wasn't long before the news had a video of Jessica limping out of the hospital with a big smile on her face. Once at home, Jessica went on to lead a normal life, largely out of the public eye until she graduated high school in 2004. She went on to get married a few years later where she began to start a family. In 2011, at the age of 25, she gained access to a trust fund resulting from the donations she received from all around the world after the incident. Reportedly worth between $800,000 and $1.2 million, she bought a modest home for her family and invested the rest of the money. In an interview with People magazine 7 years ago, she said that she doesn't remember anything about that day in 1987, but she is still referred to as Baby Jessica by her friends and some strangers from her hometown still to this day. Now 37, Jessica understands why so many people became invested in her survival for those few days. Knowing there were several other cases of kids falling into wells and not surviving in the decades previous to her story, she said that her life is a miracle. Having 2 children with her husband, she works as a special education teacher's aide at a local elementary school. Further saying, "I think it's amazing that people would come together like that to donate money to a child that's not theirs. I appreciate everything they did."